I have a right, a constitutional right to defend myself, and I will do that. And I look forward to doing that. I look forward to seeing the process play out. And if the Ethics Committee finds a reason to remove me, that is the process. This isn't about politics.
Welcome back to America Decides. I think you and I can file what we just heard under That Was Then, This Is Now. What you just saw was New York Congressman George Santos referring back in May to the House Ethics Committee's process, its investigation. Today, he called the Ethics Committee's findings, quote, a politicized smear. Mike Lawler, Congressman, 17th District of New York, Republican, joins us now. Congressman, good to see you. The Ethics Committee, on a unanimous basis, said today that George Santos, your Republican colleague, also representing a district in New York, knowingly filed false FEC, Federal Election Commission reports, used campaign money for personal expenses, engaged in fraudulent conduct, and engaged in willful violations of the Ethics in Government Act. Your reaction to the Ethics Committee's report and what effect do you think it will have on Santos's continued membership in the House of Representatives?
Well, it confirms everything that I suspected. And as I've said repeatedly since December, he needs to resign. He is unfit to serve as a member of Congress. His conduct was not only unethical and unbecoming and embarrassing, it's criminal. With the guilty plea of his campaign treasurer just a few weeks ago and the guilty plea of a campaign aide this week, and now the ethics report, there is more than enough information for him to be removed from Congress. I and several of my New York colleagues had introduced an expulsion resolution a few weeks ago. It was voted down on a bipartisan basis. But I think now, with this report coming out, it is clear what he did, how he did it. And I think it's more than enough for members to vote to remove him overwhelmingly. So, if he had any decency, he would resign. But in the absence of that, obviously, when we get back from the Thanksgiving recess, I suspect there will be a expulsion resolution brought to the floor, at which time he will be removed from Congress.
You suspect that he will be removed on that second vote?
I do. I think this information is damning. The report is clear and convincing. And he refused to cooperate with the Ethics Committee. He defrauded donors. He defrauded the NRCC and had campaign staff impersonating Speaker McCarthy's former chief of staff. The list of fraudulent conduct and criminal conduct is just breathtaking, coming on top of all the lies that he told in advance of his election to Congress.
Congressman Lawler, the Ethics Committee release also makes reference to additional uncharged, unlawful conduct that the Ethics Committee is referring to the Justice Department. Do you have any idea what that might be, and do you think that will add further weight to the consideration of expelling Congressman Santos?
Well, there's a 50-plus page report that lays out much of the conduct. Obviously, there's been 2 indictments already, a superseding indictment that came down just about a month ago after the guilty plea of his treasurer. So, he's already facing 23 felony counts, and I suspect more to come given this report.
The Congressman Santos has released a statement calling the Ethics Committee report, and I quote, biased, disgusting, politicized smear. Your reaction?
Look, it's a delusional ranting of someone who has proven himself incapable of telling the truth. And obviously, the information contained in that report, coupled with the guilty plea of his treasurer, the guilty plea of a campaign staffer, is more than enough information to remove him from Congress. He is unfit for public office, and Congress should act immediately in the absence of his resignation.
In that statement, Congressman Santos said he will not seek re-election in 2024. Your reaction to that, and do you think that will take any steam out of the effort to expel him?
Delusional to think that he was going to be re-elected in 2024. Look, at the end of the day, he was never going to be on the ballot in 2024. He would have lost a Republican primary, but very gracious of him to understand that he will not be running for re-election in 2024. He should do more than that and resign, effective immediately.
Congressman Lawler, from your perspective, is there a larger story here in that something was missed in the campaign that George Santos conducted and that he should have been scrutinized more before landing in Congress, either by the Republican Party, the press in the congressional district in which he ran, or the Democratic opponent who challenged him?
Well, I think obviously, we've certainly seen in recent years, an increase in the number of people running for office to become quasi-celebrities. We need to make sure that the people running for public office are serious, sober-minded, and focused on addressing the challenges facing the American people. I think it's incumbent on both parties, obviously, to make sure that the people running on their ballot line meet those standards and certainly are who they say they are. And obviously, the press needs to do a better job of covering some of these races. Oftentimes, they don't focus on these issues until it becomes a story. And there was local press that was trying to expose his conduct and behavior, but obviously a lot of blame to go all around here.
Do you think there's any blame that should go to the local Republican Party, state Republican Party, or national Republican Party for failing to vet George Santos thoroughly?
Look, I think the Republican Party would readily admit, a better job should have been done in screening him. I know there were members of our party who did not want to support him because of some of the questions that they had. But ultimately, again, a lot of blame can go around here. The bottom line is he does not belong in Congress, and we need to move to expel him.
Hard prediction. Will George Santos in January of 2024 be a member in good standing of the U.S. House of Representatives?
No.
Congressman Mike Lawler, 17th District of New York and Republican, we thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Major.